Our last speaker before lunch is the daughter of a god. You may have heard of this god. Likes to hang out in the depths of the ocean by the name of Cthulhu. And Cthulhu's daughter, Managra, is one to be feared. Those who see her right before they, scream themselves into out of existence, say she has tentacles for hair and the blackest eyes you've ever seen. And she lives in the forests, and several sources say worshipped by witch cults in Salem, Oregon. So, if you don't want her to put a curse on you, you will pay attention. She is Amye Scavarda!
Well, that was a delightful intro, and I can see that the mic is working and everything. You can all see this all? Cool. Excellent. Awesome. Rock and roll. So, this is the Road to Mordor, Information Security and your open source project. From time to time, communities will run across information security incidents. How many of you has this happened to? Lots of hands? Some hands? Okay, some people are admitting to it. Other people don't know that they have it yet. Got it. So in the course of a project expansion, it always seems like a really good idea to wake up, something with a database and just not write down the credentials or just, we're just spinning this thing up. Oh, it's gonna be totally fine. But sometimes you don't think very clearly about what those permissions need to be and what happens if this hung around for longer than just tomorrow? So you are going to discover at some point that you're going to be hacked. And you will have done something dumb, and I will explain how this is no one's fault. But The Lord of the Rings is actually a perfect model for being able to deal with your information security issues. And let's see if this works. Oh, yes! As I get rolling in here, a disclaimer. I'm very sorry. There is no code. And you don't even have to know all of The Lord of the Rings to be able to actually understand this talk. You can have a bare idea of the journey here. I am not going to go deep into code. There is no live demos. And because I understand that I am standing between you and lunch, there may not even be anything of substance. So for me, this came from when I was working at a hosting company when Heartbleed showed up. Oh, yes. Y'all remember Heartbleed? Oh, yeah. Yes. For those that were not around for that particular incident, a vulnerability so deep down into the depths of internals that you've never even thought about it suddenly rose out of the deep. And every computer you had ever seen in your entire life was likely affected. The end. So I was at a hosting company, and I had kind of seen this particular thing come out that morning, and it was this is blowing up on Twitter. God, that's interesting. Huh. And I kind of went around my normal day, and it keeps blowing up. And previously, at that time, that was the biggest level of Twitter rage. Now we are convinced that there are depths of Twitter rage that we had not seen before. But at the time, it was oh, this is totally a thing. So I kept going all day with that's interesting. This is fascinating. Turns out, later in the day, one of my Australian colleagues woke up and was that's interesting. Let me go look a little deeper in all of this. And he pretty quickly realized that not all was well in the Shire. And so, the beacons of Amandine were lit. And this is before Slack. So we had to do it manually. We, had to put the GIF into the chat, and we all had to go click on the link, and it didn't automatically expand. And it was a dark time. It was a dark and miserable time, but a lot of people got pinged as part of all of this going oh, not all is well in the Shire. And I started thinking about what it would be like to actually use The Lord of the Rings as a model to be able to manage these incidents. So where I am now is I'm now a community lead at Red Hat. My focus is being able to feed and water a community. This means I want to keep it safe. I want to be able to keep the garden tended. I want to be able to make sure there are no weeds. This includes our infrastructure. Because I'm at Red Hat, I have a kind of a dual perspective on this now. I have both the open source project as well as what it's like to be at a company with a management structure. So I will speak to both of these things, and you can take from it what you want. Also heckling. Heckling is allowed. But I know that I will not have time for questions. You can find me at food carts for questions. So, back to that forging the ring. Anytime that you bring up a server, or a service that has access to maybe something that it shouldn't because you just want to try it out. Ooh, how fun. Ooh. Or anytime that you install something on a server, you have the power to be able to forge a ring. Depending on who you are, you have even more ultimate power. If your SSH keys happen to be the same one that you've been reusing over and over again, how many of you have done this? That's what I thought. Stop doing that. But this is something that you do inadvertently to be able to kind of make it easier for you in the moment, and you're not thinking about what the longer term thing is. This is actually nobody's fault. But in order to be able to illustrate all of this, I bring you Lego Hobbits. So you get the Fellowship of the Ring in order to be able to actually come and solve this particular problem. In the beginning, someone has forged the ring. Note that we do not have Sauron here because no one does this on purpose. Sauron is there like as a malicious sort of evil. None of us do this maliciously. If the Sauron and the forces of hackers, that's another talk entirely. We're just kind of sidelining that. Let's just say you've done something dumb. Somewhere along the line, and you want to deal with that dumb. Gollum. Gollum is the person that finds this and kind of forgets about it for a little bit. Like, you know, they're reasonably certain that this is actually there. However, there's this thing about the ring. This is no one's fault. The next time that this happens to me, I am going to work with, at the very end, when everything is all settled and done, everyone on the team that's been working on this gets donuts. And this donut has the Elvish writing on top of this. And the intention is to be able to let the entire team know, hey, this has been a thing, this has been a very explicit problem, you have solved it, and no one is singled out. The entire team gets the ring donut, not necessarily just the person that did it in the first place. Although the person that did it in the first place might get an extra special donut. This is part of the retrospective that you can put together for your information security incidents. Now, moving forward, Bilbo. Is there a Bilbo in here? No. Bilbo is a wiki. If you write it down and you forget about it, you become Bilbo. Bilbo is a wiki. Frodo is the poor, hapless sysadmin that comes by and discovers this thing, like, that log looks a little funny. Sometimes Frodo actually has to be the person that walks this one all the way through and solves this problem. Your job is to be able to make sure that Frodo can actually kill the ring. Gandalf. Gandalf is the senior staffer who comes by and reads the logs and goes, you do have a thing in there. Look at that. And the thing about Gandalf is, Gandalf may not actually be around to be able to solve everything, but that senior staffer that says, oh, you should look at that other thing, and I don't know that I like that particular next step that is going to come out of that. That is Gandalf. The Hobbits. The Hobbits are the rest of the people on your team that have to be able to solve this, but there is only one Frodo. There is only one person that actually says when this thing is done. More on Hobbits later. Strider. If you are very, very good, or really lucky, you'll get another senior staffer to be able to come by and help with discovery and remediation and all of that. This person is InfoSec, and you want to listen to them because they have seen things, and they are going to be able to help walk you through what this particular solution is going to be. Again, I'm thinking from both a project and an overall management company perspective. So, you've got the ring. What do you do? Discovery. Stay calm. This is the journey to Rivendell. That part where everyone's like, we gotta leave the Shire. You found the ring. You don't know what all the pieces are yet. You don't know what this is connected to, but you need to get out of the Shire as fast as possible. And you want to be able to actually make sure that you're doing a proper discovery of, does this thing link to something else? Is there something else that I should have known about? What else is going on in here? Treat this like the journey to Rivendell. So communication. You should do this. You should be communicating with the team around you. You should be communicating with your management structure, assuming that you have one. If you are the management structure, communicate with yourself. If you have information security, you should get some. And legal is actually a special note. You may not always have this available as far as your project or your structure, but being able to warn legal early and often that this thing might be a thing. And your public relations team so they can also help watch, and you're going to want their help to be able to craft how to be able to say something in the end. Once you've established that, your day-to-day coordination can change. What I've done in the past is keeping like a direct running document of who is doing what where the responsibilities are. Also being able to have like, an IRC channel like way back in the back that only certain people get access to, and you are the keeper of the keys. If you are Frodo, you are the one that says, I acknowledge that you were on this quest. You're coming into the room. By your coming into the room, you acknowledge that you too are on this quest and you are not going to be able to talk about this to the rest of the team. This is a very important thing. You would be surprised. Other pieces that I've done as far as day-to-day coordination include daily calls. At the end of the day, I will send out an agenda. This is what's happened. This is the thing that we're going to discuss very first thing the next morning. This works fairly well for being able to do time zone coordination because you are reliably communicating every 12 hours with either a status update or a voice update, and everyone has a chance to be able to say, this is where things are going, and if something is slipping, you can see it fairly quickly of, we seem to be blocked on this. Why? And then you talk. And the next part is week-to-week coordination, because you want to know what done looks like. And you also want to know what success looks like, and they may not be the same things. Success does not usually entail burning the whole place down, but you can consider it as part of this process, depending on how bad it is. Other pieces in here, the actual remediation is going to change depending on what it is that you're running into. And again, I'm being particularly vague here in order to be able to provide a framework. And make a checklist, follow the checklist. It seems simple, but it seems just that hard when you're right in the middle of it. So back to the fun part. You've done discovery. You've got to the point where you think you know the scope of the problem. The Council of Elrond is where this really gets good. You're going to need legal, like I've mentioned before. Again, smaller open source projects may not have this. Companies may need to bring in legal, and you may not always know what to be able to do with that. You're also going to have elves, because the Council of Elrond, they're kind of helpful, and they're kind of not. We would like to do things like yesterday, or later, or sometime tomorrow. And you need to figure out why the people that are in the Council of Elrond are acting like elves. Sometimes it's because they have some really good reasons about why this is. Sometimes you may not actually acknowledge their reasons, but knowing that those reasons are out there, they have valid concerns. You will also have dwarves. They will want to get this particular thing done as soon as possible. The smashing with the axe thing, that's a legitimate way of being able to solve things, but there are always going to be repercussions around that. Acknowledge that there are dwarves. I've already talked about the InfoSec pieces as well, but making sure that everybody knows that they're on the quest is what the goal of the Council of Elrond meeting is. Because this is what happens next. So that thing where you go through discovery and you didn't quite do an accurate discovery, you end up in the Mines of Moria because something that was forgotten. Why should we take that shortcut? Oh, we should oh, this is a bad shortcut. And you have a plan, and you still get circumvented. So either way, understand that as part of the process, it can get more urgent, and you end up in the Mines of Moria, which is really one of my favorite slides about all of this. And I know I talk about a lot about legal and all of this. There are two different ways to be able to think about legal within this framework. Sometimes legal will come down on the side of Galadriel. We want to help you. We want to make sure that everything goes well. Other times, they come down as Boromir, and you end up as a dead hobbit floating down the river, and no one ever knows about that particular bug. Honestly, there's not much to do about Boromir. You could go back and you could have another Council of Elrond. The time for that is really past on this slide. Once you've started this process, if they come by and kill it, or some other department comes by and kills this, it's just dead. Good grief, Boromir. What will certainly happen next is that half your team is going to get pulled off to work on another bug. The hobbits are going to get captured, and you're going to be stuck with just a few people being able to do this. So then the question you need to ask is, what happens if we do nothing? Because this Boromir character ends up as a forcing function, and it forces you to ask the question of, what happens if we do nothing? I used to do a lot of project management consulting, and I also did a lot of requirements gathering within that project management consulting. And one of the biggest questions that I would ask is, what happens if we do nothing? This does one of two things. One, it estimates the impact of the thing that you're about to do. And two, it scares the living daylights out of everybody not asking that question. Because if they're not thinking about what the impact of doing nothing is, there's no way to be able to motivate what that next step can be. This ended up being one of the more important questions, just kind of overall. So it becomes my favorite question. The extra credit parts are being able to make sure that you have a process in place before you actually get towards something like this. You can even start using this talk. I won't mind. If you want to come by and like drop me emails about like hey, what should I be doing to put in the process in place? I can give you rough pointers, but I'm not an expert. This is just something that I've found fun to be able to make this slightly easier for everyone, because InfoSec is fun for everyone. Yes. Yes, no. This is like the most terrible thing that you want to be able to move past. The process that we use in some ways can be making sure that you have the correct people written down ahead of time. Who needs to be involved? Who can help fix this? Who can say whether or not something should be embargoed? And what's something that can be embargoed? It can be an issue that will introduce a zero-day vulnerability, but you may have other criteria within your project and your scope and your just general team of things that should be completely embargoed. Other pieces are, how do you identify a security issue? How would someone, not anybody currently on your team, let you know of an issue that isn't yours? Is this a contact form? Is this an email? Where does this email go to? Does it go to a private list? Does it go to one person's inbox who, if they happen to be out on vacation or they get hit by a bus, you never know again? Is it smoke signals in the back channels of IRC? Only you can determine the way that you would want to be contacted and then being able to write that down and publicize that. Other important piece, how can you confirm that this actually exists? Think about the ways and people who would need to be involved. Sitting down and investigating in that same sort of way. How can I outline what is going to be the important part here? Does it actually affect my project? Is this something that's shown up randomly and it's actually something much deeper? Does it affect more than one part of my project? What's the impact of the vulnerability? How difficult would this be to be able to actually exploit? Is this, hey, I've given the root password to someone and now they can come in and do anything? Don't give out the root password. The end. Does this affect any other projects? Who else needs to know about it? And realistically, how risky is this? And that's where you ask my favorite question. What happens if we do nothing? Yeah, just sit with this. Like, what happens if we just did nothing? Because when you ignore something, that's the same thing as asking this question. And again, it scares the living daylights out of anybody that's not asking the question. Let's say that you've gone through everything and everything's perfect. The bug is fixed. Now what? What is your normal release process for your project, for your product? You're about to do it in a hurry. Hope it's good. Hope you've got it tested, because you're about to have this happen real quick. What's your normal way of being able to announce a release? You're going to want to get PR involved in terms of how you phrase this. Do you normally announce it on your blog? Go back and update the ticket about what it is that this was and why we did what we did, so that someone, not you, or maybe you 6 months later, can come back and be like, oh, we maybe didn't quite get everything. The whole thing starts over. Have a donut. And I said that I wasn't going to talk about Sauron, but I was wrong. There is an eye that watches. And this is why you want to make sure that everybody that is on the quest with you understands that there is an eye out there. The last thing that you want is for something to leak that you have not yet resolved. The way that you want this to end is, we saw this, we fixed it, we're all good. We're moving on. Everyone cool. No issues. This isn't always like in a perfect world, but it's my talk, so I can make it up. And the Eye of Sauron is also the press. It comes by and watches. And this includes people on Twitter, this includes all of that, and making sure that everybody knows that they're all on the quest together. The other thing that I think about this is that you want to be able to make sure that this process improves your project, that it improves the product, and you have somehow noticed something more about your communication styles as you've gone through this, because they will happen again. It's no one's fault. These just happen. How you recover and how you deal with it matters even more importantly. Congratulations, you have survived the shadow of the Angel of InfoSec falling across your doorstep. I think the thing that I want to leave you with the most is that these things are not inevitable, but certainly important. And they can be turning points in the way that your teams work. You can use this as, in some ways, a forcing function for being able to improve what it is that you're doing and how you're doing it, but only if you're paying attention to it. And so, in the words of David Foster Wallace, I wish you way more than luck. Thank you.